Welcome to another episode of Life and Whiskey. As always, I'm Jordan, and on this episode, we are going to look at Jim Beam, the white label. This is the classic regular Jim Beam, 80 proof, 40% ABV. Again, doing the 50 milliliter bottle. I did not look at how much a 750 costs, but here in Wyoming, I can get the 50 ml bottle for $1.29, and then I went on to TotalWine.com, and I found that their price for the 750 was $14.99. So you're going to be somewhere in the teens, I'm guessing, for a 750 of Jim Beam white label stuff. And Beam Suntory product, pretty big name brand, it's been around for quite a while. Quite a storied past. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a picture. I can't really see it because of the reflection. Sort of, there you can. Those are all of the distillers, the family legacy, or so they say, of the Beam and No family. And so there you go. We're going to dig into this real quick. I don't have a whole lot to go off of other than my memory, because I've had Jim Beam a time or two in my life. So everything you're getting straight off the cuff on this one. And then the next part of the video will be some more considerations while you're hiking. So, heavy corn dust, a little bit of cherry in there, no ethanol, cherry into, maybe not floral, but probably more towards that apple honey, I would say. Going in for the taste. It has been a really long time since I've had Jim Beam. That was not at all what I remember the flavor profile being. Herbal, floral, apple up front. Then into a caramel and a vanilla just briefly in the middle, and it kind of falls apart in the mid. And then it goes into a finish that hits at oak, black pepper, and ethanol on the very tail end of it. All the notes move fairly smoothly. I would say those forward floral notes are actually a little bit spiky, a little bit punchy. Going back to the nose, more floral than anything, but then still a little bit of cherry. Almost no oak, no brown sugar, no vanilla, no nothing like that in there. Second sip, floral went bye-bye. There's no floral in there at all. Sweet, creamy caramel. A hint of vanilla. It's funny that I said all those things because it didn't show up in the nose at all. Showed up in the taste. Those two flavors dominated, and then it finished with oak and black pepper. So, it's a pretty simple, classic bourbon profile. It hits all the regular notes. I'm going to say it leans to the sweeter side. It's an 80 proof whiskey. What more do you want? Nothing extraordinary, but certainly nothing bad or off-putting about it. So, again, for a bottle in the teens, it may be something you definitely want to go check out if you haven't already. It's a classic big name brand. If you were to pick big name brands, Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, Knob Creek, Maker's Mark, what the heck else? Buffalo Trace, Four Roses. Those are going to be the name brands that people know, and they're not overly expensive or whatever. So Jim Beam white label definitely fits right in there, and it's worth a look. There's nothing bad to say about it, that's for sure. And for the price, not it's hard to beat. It's the same as all the others. They're all kind of right in there. So Can't go wrong. Good old Jim Beam. Okay, so some more considerations while you're hiking, things that you may not think of that are going to help keep you safer while you're out. So the first thing is don't walk on logs, especially early in the morning. There's three major hazards. If they are wet at all, you're going to land on your head. They are super, super slick. And if you're hunting in semi-colder mornings and nights, there's a good chance you're going to come into contact with frost. Same problem. The second problem you'll have is that they're not fixed to the earth. They can roll out from underneath you, and especially on a grade, you step on a log, you land on your side, you break your bow, you break a bone, you get some road rash at best, whatever. It's going to make your day a little bit more rough. So try not to step on sticks and logs and stuff, especially early in the morning. Your boots will not have any traction on them if they're wet or frosted at all, at a minimum. There's a lot that goes into this one. So So the next one then is also pay attention to loose debris on the ground. Rocks, sticks, twigs, pine needles, leaves. Same exact problems. Super, super slick. They're not adhered to the ground. If you're on a slope, it'll take your feet out from underneath you. You'll find the ground pretty hard. Also, so there's loose rocks, gravel, hard ground. So if you're on a steep slope and your boots, your treads, your lugs can't dig into it, you're basically walking on concrete. That can be a slip hazard. Leaves, pine needles, wet grass, moss-covered ground and rocks and logs, loose dirt, so hard compacted dirt and really loose dirt, both problems. All these things create slip hazards, and there's a good chance for a spill or a twisted ankle if you're not paying attention to them. Now, knowing that your feet will slip while you're hiking is advantageous because you can kind of ride the slide out if your foot starts to slip. You can place your foot somewhere and know that it's not going to hold, so you can quickly move from step to step, if you need to get across something quick or whatever. But all of that goes back to paying attention to where you are putting your feet, which we discussed in the previous video. So, as I said, look up, assess where you're going, look down, look where you're going to put your feet, and then after you move your feet, look back up and assess what's around you again. It's going to help you out, but there is a lot of stuff that on flat ground do not pose a hazard that the second you put it on a slope become major problems. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. When traversing steep slopes, use the edge of your soles that are towards the inslope. This will allow you to dig into the ground. What I mean by that is, okay, I grabbed my boots, and it doesn't matter what kind of boots you have here. These are a Cabela's brand boot that's made by Mindel. I think it's like the Alaskan blah 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 something or other. They're 200-gram insulated boots. I really wish they were uninsulated, but they didn't come that way, so I got what I got. But what I mean like that is, if you're walking this direction, when you step with this foot, you want to use. So if the hill is coming from you to me, right? So it's sliding this way, and you're walking that direction. You want to use this edge of your foot to step into the hill, and use the treads on this side of your foot to dig into the ground. When you step with this foot, then, again, you want to be on the inside of the slope. So, again, from you to me, it's sloping downward. You want to use this edge. So you got this foot stepping in that way and this foot stepping in that way. The thing with these nice hunting boots for mountain hunting is the rands, and often they'll have a shank in them. They don't flex a whole lot, which means that you got good ankle support all the way, so you don't have to worry about tipping your ankles, like stepping on the insole and then snapping your foot up like this so that your leg's like that and rolling an ankle as much. It's still a hazard, But these boots will eliminate, or a boot built like this will eliminate a lot of that hazard. So use the edges of your boots to dig into the ground where possible when going across slopes. Don't just try and, the slopes like this, don't just try and step on it flat-footed that way. Step with the edge of your boot. Okay. Also, if you're going upslope or downslope, don't walk downhill pointed with your toes pointed down or uphill with your toes pointed up. Use the edges of your boots again. You know, if you're going up, step out to the side. Start hiking uphill at a, you know, like I said in the last video, do switchbacks. So you're going to hike up to the side this way, switch directions, hike up to the side that way, using your edges as you go. Going downhill, I often will, you know, sidestep down if it's extremely steep, or walk in a reverse switchback going the opposite direction, digging your feet in, because the more you can slice into the terrain, the better. Even with good lugs, such as these, where they're cut back really well, you know, especially on your heel here, you got a really good cut. Even with that, especially as I mentioned in the last tip, if you're on gravel, if you're on hard surfaces or something like that where you don't have the ability to dig in and stick your foot and hold, if you're going down, your foot will slip right out from underneath you. Okay, so make sure that you are trekking down in both directions using the edges of your boots. Okay, so there's some tips on that for you. So basically your goal is to keep stability and reduce the slippage. However you find that to be most easily obtained, do that method. This is the method that I use when I'm hiking. It seems to work, you know, especially if you have a load on and you're doing trekking poles and you can stabilize one side or the other. It's good to do that. So go ahead, give it a try. Give it a try before you go on your hunting trip. See what works best for you. Okay, what else we got here? Attempt to walk flat-footed as much as possible while hiking. So I just got done telling you to use the edges of your boots. True, yes, do that as much as possible. However, you will find that if you're going up a hill, you know, even if you're walking on your edges, you don't need to walk on your edges every single time. You will learn what gradient or what type of ground cover you need to dig in on, and what kind of ground cover you can just walk up, or how steep of a slope you can just walk up without fear of losing your footing. And knowing that once you do find your, you know, you figure that out, you want to walk as flat as possible, as much as possible. And what I mean by that is, if this is your slope, say it's a mild slope, and it's only sitting like this, you want your feet to be flat like this as much as possible. If you find yourself walking on your toes like this, I can't even flex this boot, but walking on your toes like this and walking on your toes as you go up, what you are doing is a perpetual calf raise. So if you have 1,000 vertical feet and you're walking on your toes up that 1,000 feet, you did 1,000 feet's worth of calf raises. And what that does is that puts strain and tension in your calf muscles. The two downsides to this is you just burned a shitload of energy, way more than you needed to. And B, you built up that lactic acid in your muscles, and you put strain on your muscles, right? So now at night while you're sitting around the campfire, you need to roll those muscles out, stretch those muscles out. They're going to be sore, they're going to be tired, and you're now in a major deficit of calories, more so than you would have been if you had walked flat-footed. Flat-footed allows you actually to stretch those muscles as you're walking somewhat, which can be beneficial. I mean, think of like keeping your feet flat on the ground, bending over and touching your toes. Essentially, that's what you're doing. Or to stretch your calf, often you find an inverted, slanted plane and you step on it. you lean into it with that toe stretched up, it gives you a good calf stretch. That's what you're trying to do as much as possible. It's not perfect in every scenario. It's not advantageous to use in every scenario, but as much as you can keep your feet flat on the ground, the better off you're going to be. So something to think about. Let's see here. And finally, the last thing I want to mention in this video is, as much as possible, you want to avoid walking above the ground on logs and trees and rocks and other things. You will find, especially if you hunt burns or areas where there's high winds and a lot of downfall, or areas of a lot of beetle kill, things like that, that you will find that trees can stack up on top of each other. They call it blowdown. And when you get into those areas, and you will get into those areas, number one, just walking along, you will find an area like that just randomly. But number two, elk often use those areas as their bedding areas, or at least in my experience, that's what I have found. And so if you have logs that are stacked up 4 deep, you might be 5, 6, 7, 8 feet off the ground. And the only way to get through to the next location is to climb up and over. And the temptation is that once you're up on top of that log stack, you're like, oh, I can just walk the tightrope for 40 or 50 feet, because I can see that the way to around all of this brush here is to walk there and then step over the next log and the next log and the next log. Just keep in mind, the higher up you are, the further you are going to fall when you fall. You will slip at some point. Logs are slippery. Bark peels off of trees. Trees are dead and punky and will snap in half. Any number of things can happen. You're just very off balance. You have weight on your pack that is pulling you one way or another in space. It can be pretty problematic. So you want to avoid that as much as possible, because if you fall off, you have the height, which can break bones, twist ankles, break equipment. If you're lucky, that's all that happens. You're in brush and trees. Each branch sticking up is a great way to impale yourself. Impale your crotch, impale your leg, impale an arm, impale your armpit. If you fall back flat-footed, impale you in your stomach or your torso, whatever. The last thing you want to do is be that body that's found on a pike out in the middle of the woods somewhere because you slipped off of a log. Don't forget, steal a quote from Joe Rogan, you're just a meat sack of blood, you're very soft. You're basically jello. It doesn't take much to run a stick through your leg, and I think we've grown so accustomed to not being around such hazards that we don't really think about such hazards. But if you're this high, chest high, off the ground, and you slip off and there's a stick down there, and say that stick is also maybe just this far below, right? So you're this high up, and you go to step over that stick and you don't quite make it as you're falling. Now this stick, from this high, you just fell onto something that's probably snapped off and jagged, right? Comes up. You can catch your crotch. You will bleed out and die. You can catch your femoral artery. You will bleed out and die. Those are the worst case scenarios. But you can also impale your leg and go completely through it. Flesh wound, but not an awesome one. You can go through your calf. You can go through whatever, right? I know that sounds over the top, and it is, right? Chances are 999 out of 1,000 times it's not going to happen. But it is a possibility, and it's something to be aware of. So if you can, avoid being up high off the ground walking on these logs. And the reason why I bring this up is because my first year here in Wyoming, I was chasing some bugles. I was ignorant. I went down a very steep canyon about 500 feet, and then I had to go up the other side of the canyon about 500 feet. What I didn't learn or didn't know was that down in the bottom, the creek, all the trees along the creek had fallen over. So now I'm walking across this creek and maybe like 50 yards on either side of the creek, on trees that have fallen over that creek, and I'm 5 to, I think there was one tree that might have been 15 feet off the ground, 4 or 5 trees deep. Had I slipped and fell, I was hunting by myself, I was in a canyon, I was 1.5 miles from my truck, there's no way in hell anybody would know where I was. It would have been the end of me. Wasn't smart. I don't advise it. When I got up on top of the ridge chasing the beagle disappeared, I couldn't get the bull, blah blah blah, I decided to come back down, came down in a different area. The entire slope I tried to come down was all downfall, so now it was a steep slope. I bet you it was 400 feet of elevation in 30 or 40 yards, and I'm not exaggerating. It was steep. And the logs, the trees are blown downhill, so now when you walk across one of the logs, you're 5-6 feet off the ground, but also going downhill. But it was the only way to get through that stuff. If I had been smarter, I would have figured out a way to try and get around that stuff, but I didn't. So that's my advice to you. Avoid tightrope walking on logs above the ground as much as possible. There are times where that is the only way, and I get it, but do your best to be safe, especially the further and the deeper you are from camp. If you're hunting with other people, that helps a bit, but they still have to work to get you out if you wreck yourself. So just keep that in mind. And I just want everybody to be safe out there, and these are all hazards that one doesn't think about, or like myself, when I was in the action of actually doing it, it wasn't until then that I was like, oh, this is very unsafe and stupid, why am I doing this, that you realize exactly what you got yourself into, and that doing that is exactly how things go from fun and a great experience to tragedy and horror in a split second, is just by not thinking about what you're doing, because it seems so innocent at the time. So there you go, done lecturing. Hopefully you found some great information in there and some ideas about some things to keep your eyes open and things to think about. Maybe practice some of your hiking skills. Everybody's like, oh, you're just walking, right? It's not that difficult, and it's not. But there are some little techniques to help you save energy and also help you go a little bit further, deeper, longer. So something to think about. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, Jim Beam White, kind of their lowest version that they got, with the exception of all the flavored crap that they got. We won't even begin to talk about that stuff because I don't consider it whiskey at all. But a really good and decent whiskey for the price. Again, TotalWine.com. I was able to get this for, what did I say it was, $14.99 for a 750, $1.29 for this 50 milliliter here in Wyoming. Anyways, hope you guys have yourselves a great day. Thanks for watching. If you found some value in this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'm hoping to keep providing good information like this, not necessarily just on elk hunting, going forward. And you know what, if you didn't like something or you had 2 cents that you want to add, feel free to drop that in the comments below, and we'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.